And the last one that I found really quite troubling was this massive gulf in our perceptions of immigration. And the reason why it was such a big surprise to me is because in the last decade, New Zealand has been extraordinarily dependent on immigration for population growth and for our access to workers and skills, right? That has been the shorthand for how do we meet our skill shortages and economic growth in New Zealand. In Australia, 8% of people say immigrants don't make good citizens. In New Zealand, it's 49%. Right? As an immigrant, that's bloody scary, right? As my children who look like immigrants who've grown up in this place, it's scary. But it's also fundamentally scary because immigration has been a fabric of our nation's history. And for the country to be so against it in such a big way is worrying. The most against immigration are people from New Zealand First, people who are ACT Party supporters, people who are unemployed, people who are at home, people who are poor, and people who are more likely to be Maori. This is not one stereotypical group who don't like immigration. It is a wide group of New Zealanders who are really uncomfortable with the situation. Now, I'm not going to go through every statistic in the report because I'm a nerd and I love this stuff, but I know you don't. But I wanted to give you a sense of just the sense of discomfort I got when I saw these results. I had to walk away from the results when David emailed them to me because I was so disappointed and upset. It was very confronting. So we don't yet have a very good answer in terms of so what happens from here, but I know what it's not. What the social cohesion survey and the idea of social cohesion is not all of us being the same. Diversity is good, it's okay. We will always have differences of views and opinions. We should not be trying to wish away confrontation. And when I was doing the interview with Jack, he goes, but do you want confrontation? I'm like, yes, absolutely. We want to have debate, we want to have conversation, but it should be civil and we should be able to change our minds if the evidence is put to us. It's our inability to accept evidence, in our inability to engage in good faith that's hard. And we should not wish away politics. Politics is there for a reason. We want to be able to confront these decisions. We want to be able to have these contest of ideas. But what we don't have a contest of is whether there is a problem. What we want a contest of is what are the right solutions. And we are absolutely capable of doing this in New Zealand, right? I look at housing policy in New Zealand. 10 years ago, we were arguing about whether there's a problem or not. Today, we're arguing about who's got the right ideas for the solutions. I'd much rather be here than where we were 10 years ago. Across political parties, we are still capable of arguing for the solutions, not just the problems. There are some ideas on the kinds of things that the literature says could be useful in terms of improving social cohesion. The first one, I think, is a big ask. It's about better leadership and better political processes. Not just politics in terms of theater of politics, but the actual processes for people to be able to participate, people to be able to feel engaged in the way that we make decisions. But there are also individual things that we can do. And that starts with what we're doing today. First is awareness, just understanding that maybe things are not quite so good as we hoped, that there is a problem in this country, but it's not irrevocably broken. The second one is really hard. It's holding up the mirror and asking, what stereotypes do I hold and are they inaccurate? Can you see a person beyond the stereotypes we hold of others? If you're a rich person, do you think about poor people all as the same? If you're a white person, do you see a brown person all as the same? If you're an Asian person, do you see politics in one lens? There's so many different lenses that we apply, and stereotypes are extremely harmful because sometimes we can't see things at face value. What we see is the stereotype. What we don't see is the thing. And the final thing is the really, really easy one that we can all try and do, which is that opportunity of positive contact. And what I mean by that is when we have a conversation with somebody, let's have a conversation, not try to convert them to our view. We have descended into this slinging match in social media in particular, where we're there to try and convert people to our point of view, not actually to have a conversation. The social cohesion survey tells us a very important thing, that maybe things are not quite as good as we hoped, that we are behind Australia. I've shown you that there are some things that are still quite positive, and I've shown you many things that are quite troubling. The question for us is, what do we want to do next? And if I can leave you with one really clear takeaway is, for each of our interactions in life, can we just have one interaction every day where we converse rather than we try to convert? Thank you.
Hello, kia ora, thank you, Momita. I'm here in my personal capacity. I'm very passionate about the topics that we're discussing here today. There were two numbers that we saw. One was 49% of immigrants do not make good citizens. That's a belief, the feeling. And it's quite a dichotomy that 82% of people, many of whom would identify as immigrants, feel a high sense of belonging to this country. So that's quite a dichotomy in the numbers. And I also did not see any significant mention of immigrants on that who feels less of a sense of belonging there. And as a new citizen in New Zealand, I'm very curious to know how are we achieving this balance?
What it may mean is that while immigrants are feeling better about it, that the others aren't. That's the dichotomy, isn't it, that the figures are showing, but I'll leave it to Shamabin.
I think it's a really good question. And what was really interesting is we did not find a big divergence of views between those people who are born here versus people who are not born here. But what we did find was there was a divergence of views on specific issues. And in fact, some of the most racist views came from immigrants. So we just got to be really conscious that it's not just white people who are young that are racist or whatever. We all have the capability to be racist. So there's some really confronting stuff in the data. And so I didn't break it down into all the different bits because you can slice and dice it in a million different ways. But what we did not see a big divergence between where you were born. The bigger driver was if you were born in this country or if you're born overseas, but you came here and you have a bad experience in terms of being poor, feeling disconnected, unhappy, then those feelings are what gets projected onto those other bits and pieces. And there is a broader dichotomy between people saying, I feel connected to the country, but I don't feel connected to my community, and I feel lonely, and I feel angry, and I feel all of those things. So the idea of the nation is still very strong, but the reflection of that nation in their local community and their personal experiences don't necessarily translate. So the dream is still real, but I don't think the reality matches up for a lot of people.
Twyford, Labor's immigration spokesperson. I'm quite struck.
Timing is everything, isn't it?
I'm quite struck by what the data says about the disconnect between where a big chunk of the public are on migration issues and where I think politicians, most of the parliament and the sort of policy class are at. And I wondered if you have any reflections or insights based on this work about the way that politicians and the policy class should be talking about these issues and engaging with the community, with the public. And the obvious, I think, backdrop to that question is the rise of right-wing populism all over the world, where that disconnect has been exploited to really poison democracies in so many places.
So Phil, the immigration questions were extremely confronting, especially when you compare to Australia, where there is a general acceptance that they see value in immigrants. And so there is a connection between the immigration policy and the experience of immigration. I don't think that is true in New Zealand any longer. And so I really encourage you and your counterparts in other parties to have a really good think about how do we connect with New Zealanders on this issue of immigration rather than taking a technocratic approach. You cannot palm it off to the policy wonks at MB to come up with a policy because people are not responding to the policy wonks. They can't understand the language of the policy wonks. We have to speak to people as if they're a part of our community because they are our community. So I don't think the advice is any different for immigration than anything else, except I think it shows up there because it's easy to other this group. It's just much easier than every other group because they're obviously different. So come and have a chat to me afterwards. I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody across the political spectrum on this issue because fundamentally, if you look forward to the next 50 years for New Zealand, immigration can play a positive role for the future of New Zealand because of an aging population. But it will not if we don't have the social license for it. If we rely on technocrats to make that happen, we will fail. We have to get people on board with this conversation. And that begins with conversation actually at the grassroots level. Any comments, Helen?
Well, I think there's also the issue which Shamabil brought out in the interview that I saw, that immigrants in a way have been used by politicians as quick fixes for growth. But if you're not planning around that growth in population, the housing pressures, the health system pressures, the infrastructure pressures in a big city like this, where often first port of call for immigrants are schooling pressures, I think that all builds into the picture as well. So we've kind of gone for the quick wins, but not been prepared to invest to ensure that the society works for everyone with basically more people. You know, we've tried to fit many more into what we had, and it doesn't quite work. So I think that also is part of the underlying feeling that's being picked up here, and probably most acutely experienced in housing, where there just wasn't the investment and the range of housing to satisfy the needs of the society.